I built a road on my own land so I could keep my farm alive. 2 months of clearing brush, grading dirt, hauling gravel, paid for every inch myself. The morning it was finally finished, the HOA put up a steel gate across it and sent me a bill for $300 a month to use my own road. They thought I'd hook up a chain and tear it down. They were wrong. I didn't destroy the gate. I destroyed everyone behind it legally. I remember standing there in the early light, coffee still warm in my hand, staring at that gate like it had grown out of the ground overnight. Square steel posts sunk deep into fresh concrete. A keypad bolted on at eye level. A small black camera angled, just right, pointed straight at where a man's face would be if he lost his temper. The sign was clean. Too clean. Authorized vehicles only. Road access fee, $300 per month. And at the very bottom, in small print, almost like they hoped no one would read it, it said, managed by Access Management, LLC. No county seal, no official HOA letterhead, just a generic company name demanding my money. That was the first thing that didn't sit right with me. This wasn't a warning. It wasn't a notice. It was an invoice. I'd spent weeks fighting rocks and roots and summer heat to bring that road back to life. Coming home with dust in my hair, hands shaking from the vibration of machinery, back aching in ways you don't complain about because the work matters. It wasn't just a road. It was a lifeline. The day before, I'd driven it for the first time. Slow, careful, gravel crunching under the tires, no detours, no signs telling me where I could or couldn't go. It was open. It was quiet. It was mine. And now there it was. A lock on my work, a price tag on my freedom. I could already hear what people would say. I didn't even need the comments yet. It's your land. Tear it down. No one gets to block your road. I'd have that gate gone in 5 minutes. They weren't wrong about one thing. I had the equipment. I had the strength. I had the right. But what they didn't see, what that gate told me the second I looked at it, was that this wasn't about stopping me. It was about baiting me. And the moment I understood that, I knew this fight wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be slow. It was going to be quiet. And it was going to end very differently than they expected. People think this story is about a road. It isn't. It's about what happens when someone decides your work matters less than their rules. I work a piece of land in the north part of Clearbrook County, right where the tree line breaks and the fields open up. My family has been on that ground longer than the subdivision signs have been standing. Long before trim hedges, covenants, and committees telling grown men how loud their lives are allowed to be. My father worked this land, his father before him. Not because it was easy and not because it made anyone rich. They worked it because land, once you've bled into it long enough, stops being property. It becomes responsibility. We never had much in this family. No lake houses, no investment portfolios, no safety nets made of paper promises. What we had was dirt. Dirt we paid taxes on. Dirt we broke our backs on. Dirt that fed us when nothing else did. That dirt taught me something early. Order isn't something you impose. It's something you grow into. It comes from rhythm, from seasons, from work done the same way for decades. You don't vote it into existence. You earn it. Clearbrook Meadows didn't understand that. They liked the idea of living near farmland, the view, the quiet, the postcard version. But they didn't like the dust, the diesel, the hours. They wanted the land frozen in time, like scenery behind glass. At first, I stayed out of their way. I drove slow through the neighborhood. I waved. I smiled. I kept my head down. Their rules didn't touch me until they did. Heavy vehicles banned from 6 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the evening. The exact hours a farm operates, permits required for excessive traffic, fines for dust complaints, warnings for noise. That wasn't noise at all, just work. They dressed it up as safety, community harmony, quality of life, but crops don't care about HOA calendars. Livestock don't understand board meetings, and buyers don't wait around while you negotiate permission to do your job. I tried to adjust. I scheduled deliveries at dawn and dusk. I ran trucks in the dark. I planned my days around rules written by people who'd never hauled feed or fixed a fence in the rain. It didn't matter. One missed delivery turned into two. Two turned into a canceled contract. A buyer my father had worked with for 20 years called me and said he couldn't keep waiting. Not angry, just practical. He had his own margins to protect. That's how it happens. Not all at once, not dramatically. Just enough pressure applied, long enough until a man starts slipping. I remember sitting at my kitchen table late one night. Invoices spread out, coffee gone cold. The numbers didn't bend. They didn't care how hard I worked or how long my family had been there. I thought about my father, about what he'd say if he saw me asking permission to reach my own barn. I could picture it, the slow shake of his head, not angry, just disappointed. That was the moment I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit. This wasn't about rules. It wasn't about safety. And it sure as hell wasn't about community. It was about control. About whether a man who worked his land still had the right to reach it on his own terms. About whether legacy meant anything once a committee decided it didn't fit the view. And once you understand that, you stop looking for compromises. You stop hoping things will improve. You stop believing the next meeting will fix it. You start looking for another way in. That was when I remembered the old road. The old road wasn't something I found on a map right away. It came back to me the way most truths do. Quietly when you finally stop lying to yourself. I was parked outside the HOA office one morning, engine idling, waiting to go inside, and ask permission to keep doing the same work my family had done for generations. I remember looking at the building's glass doors, the little sign with office hours neatly printed, and thinking how strange it was that my livelihood depended on whether a room full of people liked the sound of my truck. That's when I remembered the back pasture. Behind the far fence line, past the stand of cottonwoods, there was a strip of land no one ever talked about. Overgrown, forgotten. A tangle of brush and saplings most folks treated like the edge of the world. When I was a kid, my father used to point that way and say, almost to himself, used to be a service road back there. County ran it before the highway went in. At the time, it hadn't meant anything to me. Roads come and go. Kids don't think about access. They just assume it will always be there. But sitting in that truck, staring at a door I didn't want to walk through, the memory landed differently. I turned the engine off, didn't go inside, just sat there a moment longer, hands on the wheel, and made a decision I hadn't known I was ready to make. I drove home and pulled out every map I had. County plat, old surveys, yellowed PDFs pulled from an online archive that looked like it hadn't been updated since dial-up. It took hours to find it, and even longer to be sure. But there was a thin, barely visible line labeled unmaintained public right-of-way. Part of it cut straight through my property. The rest traced along the edge, untouched for decades. It wasn't a loophole. It wasn't clever. It was simply something everyone else had forgotten. I called my daughter that night, Ellie. She's studying civil engineering at the community college in town. Smart kid, quiet until she isn't. The kind of mind that sees structure where others see mess. I told her what I'd found, asked her if she wanted to take a look. She didn't ask me why, didn't lecture me about risk. She just said, send me the files. The next evening we stood in the weeds together, looking at what used to be a road, or what would be again if the land allowed it. Saplings with trunks thick as fence posts, thorn vines wrapped tight like they were holding a grudge. Old fence wire half buried in the dirt, rusted and sharp. Ellie walked the line slow, survey pole in hand, marking elevation changes, checking runoff paths. She didn't talk much while she worked. When she finally looked up, she said, "It's doable, but it won't be easy." I smiled. Easy hadn't kept this farm alive this long. We brought in Lane a day later. I've known him since high school, the kind of man who can fix a diesel engine with baling wire and stubbornness. He showed up with equipment that looked older than the HOA bylaws and twice as reliable. A brush cutter, a grater, an old case dozer that still ran mean if you treated it right. The three of us stood there that first morning. Sun just coming up, looking at a wall of green that had swallowed the road whole. Lane spit in the dirt and said, "Hell of a place to put a road." I nodded. That's the point. Because this wasn't about convenience anymore. It was about independence. We didn't rush. We didn't cut corners. Ellie checked grades and drainage angles, so rain wouldn't wash our work away. Lane cleared brush a foot at a time, engine growling like it resented the vines as much as we did. I hauled debris, rock, broken posts, and whatever else decades of neglect had piled there. By the end of the first week, it didn't look like progress. It looked like exhaustion, but something important had already happened. I wasn't asking permission anymore. And once you stop doing that, the ground under your feet feels different. Work like that doesn't stay invisible for long. You clear enough brush, move enough dirt, and someone eventually asks questions. Not because they care what you're building, but because they don't like that you didn't ask first. The first sign they had noticed wasn't a letter or a fine. It was a woman standing at the split rail fence one morning, heels sinking into dirt that wasn't made for them. I heard her before I saw her. There's a sound to a farm road when it's alive. Engines, boots, wind through wire. High heels don't belong to that soundscape. They click like punctuation marks in the wrong sentence. She watched us work for a while without saying anything. Clipboard tucked under one arm, sunglasses on. The kind of stillness people wear when they think authority speaks for itself. "Good morning," she said finally. I shut down the engine and climbed down, wiped my hands on my jeans. "Morning." She didn't ask my name, didn't ask what we were doing. She looked past me down the line we'd cleared, eyes tracing the shape of the road like she was memorizing it. "We've received concerns," she said, "about this construction." That word construction landed heavy. It was chosen carefully. Concerns from who? I asked. She smiled. Not unkindly, just practiced. From residents about erosion, about traffic, about how this may affect the community's view shed. I almost laughed. Almost. The view she was talking about was a distant line of trees and fields that had existed long before Clearbrook Meadows was poured out of concrete and cul-de-sacs. But she said it like it was fragile, like a man working his land could somehow break the horizon. "This road has proper drainage," I said, sloped away from the subdivision. "Water runs back toward my pasture, same as it always has." She nodded, jotting something down. "Even so, the HOA has an obligation to preserve aesthetic harmony and environmental stability." There was the phrase that explained everything. Aesthetic harmony. A sentence so vague you could drive a bulldozer through it and still call it compliance. I told her about the easement, about the county right-of-way, about the surveys we'd pulled. I offered to show her the maps. She waved it off. "That may be so," she said, "but when changes impact the broader community, oversight becomes necessary." Necessary? For who? I wondered. I didn't argue. Not yet. I just said, "This land is mine, and the road is on it." Her pen paused. She looked at me over the top of her clipboard for the first time. "We'll need to review this," she said. "In the meantime, I'd advise you not to proceed further." Advise. Another careful word. She left the same way she came, heels clicking out of rhythm with the place. Lane watched her go, then looked at me. "That wasn't about dirt," he said. "No," I answered. "That was about permission."